My breath barely stirred the layer of snow before me. That morning was supposed to be just another winter day in rural Minnesota, the kind where frost whitens every fence post and the whole world seems to hold its breath beneath the ice. I stepped outside, shovel in hand, ready to clear the path to the gate. But then I saw it. A wooden crate stood alone by the fence, half buried in snow. No tire tracks, no footprints, just that box silent as if it had fallen straight from the sky. I brushed the frost off my coat and walked closer. The crate was gray and rough, its edges nailed shut with rusted nails. A thin crust of snow clung to the top as though the wind itself had tried to hide it. I crouched down, my palm pressing against the cold surface, and as my breath clouded the air, I noticed a small damp note pinned there with a bent nail. The paper was wet. The ink blurred the letters, trembling like a child's handwriting. We couldn't keep it warm. I froze. My breath drifted away into the cold and vanished. Something inside my chest tightened, an instinctive wrongness, that human shiver you feel before your eyes finally catch up to what your heart already knows. I knelt. The nails sealing the lid were uneven, hammered in hastily, as if someone had wanted to finish quickly and walk away. The wind whistled through the gaps, making the lid rattle softly, a small sound, yet it sent a chill straight through me. I hesitated for a moment, then slid my pocket knife into the seam. The crack of ice breaking echoed sharp dry. A rush of air escaped, colder than the air around it, so cold it made me gasp. I lifted the lid. Inside, on a torn piece of cloth, lay a Doberman puppy so small I could have held him in both hands. His black and tan fur was matted, glazed with frost like salt. His eyelids sealed shut. His muzzle trembled faintly. His fragile legs were drawn tight against his chest. No bark, no sound. Only the stillness of a life abandoned to the cold. I forgot to breathe. The world around me blurred, just wind snow, and the heavy weight pressing against my ribs. I leaned closer, whispering before I even realized I'd spoken, "Dear God." Who could do this? Behind me, footsteps crunched through the snow. I turned. It was Emma, my daughter. 21. Her hair clung with frost, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She stood still for a few seconds, then stepped closer. "Dad, what's in there?" I said nothing. She didn't need my answer. Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment our breaths mingled in the air, thin clouds drifting in the frozen silence between us. Emma pulled off her gloves and knelt. Her fingers trembled as she touched the puppy's chest. 2 seconds passed, then I saw it, a faint rise and fall. Weak. Barely there. "Dad?" she whispered. "It's still alive." I couldn't speak. She gathered the puppy in her arms, pressing him to her chest, and I heard her voice quiet as wind through pine. "Numb. Not today. He's not dying here." I watched as she ran toward the house, snow spraying around her boots, and something rose inside me, a strange mix of fear and gratitude. That morning should have been just another ordinary winter day. But from that moment on, nothing in our lives would ever be the same. I don't remember how I ran into the house. Only the slam of the door and the rush of cold air chasing me into the kitchen. My mother was standing at the sink, back turned, and she startled when she saw what I was holding, a trembling black bundle no bigger than a glove. "Emma, what on earth?" she began, but I didn't answer. I dropped to my knees in front of the fireplace, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't undo the buttons on my coat. Finally, I yanked it open, letting the little thing slide out into my palms. It was a Doberman puppy, barely a month old. Its body was stiff, its fur matted, its 4 tiny legs drawn tight like wooden sticks. I pressed it against my chest, feeling the cold seep through the fabric. It was too light, weightless, as if life itself had already slipped away. I shook it gently, whispering through my breath, "Hey, can you hear me, please?" No response. I placed my hand over its chest, silence. Then, faintly, one beat, then another. Weak, but real, I broke down. My sobs blended with the wind rattling against the windows, small but relentless. "Dad." "It's alive," I cried as he stepped into the room. He froze at the doorway, his face tightening with worry. "Emma." "That's a stray," he said, voice edged with both fear and disbelief. It could be sick, but I wasn't listening. All I knew was that something fragile was clinging to the edge of life, and if I let go, it would be gone forever. I set the puppy near the fire, pulled off my gloves, and rubbed its tiny body. Its ears drooped wet and cold. I wiped them with a towel, then wrapped them in the thickest sweater I could find. "Mom, can you get me some warm milk?" My voice trembled, but it didn't break. She looked at me, then at my father, said nothing, just nodded. When I dripped warm milk onto the puppy's lips, its head twitched. A sound escaped, the faintest whimper, fragile but unmistakable. I leaned close, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe now." Dad still stood there, arms crossed, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Emma," he said quietly, "that's a hunting breed. When it grows up, it won't be like this anymore." I didn't respond. I just watched that tiny body trembling in my hands, a creature once frozen in the snow, now fighting to breathe inch by inch. I wrapped it in a fur blanket, holding it against my chest, listening as its breaths slowly fell in rhythm with my own. It had been so long since my heart had beaten for someone else. Outside, the snow kept falling soft and silent. I whispered, almost like a vow, "No one's calling you it anymore. You need a name." I looked into its half-opened eyes, deep brown, glimmering and wild. "I'll call you Rook," I murmured, "like the black bird that flies through the cold. You're going to live. I promise." Rook didn't move, just breathed a little steadier now. I tucked the blanket around him and lay him beside the fire, my hand resting on his back. It felt like holding a small flickering flame, fragile, yet so beautiful it scared me to blink. That night, Rook slept to the crackle of the firewood. Each time I stirred, he edged closer, pressing his head against my wrist as if afraid the dark might steal the last bit of warmth left in him. I stroked him gently, and in that quiet golden room I realized maybe I had saved a life tonight. But maybe, just maybe, it was the one saving me. 3 days later, Rook was out of danger. He could stand for a few seconds before collapsing again, his tiny legs still trembling from the cold. I warmed up milk and fed him with a syringe, drop by drop, sip by sip. Each time he swallowed, I could hear the faintest breath, like a small thank you. Dad watched us from across the room, his eyes heavy with concern. "Emma," he said again, "it's a hunting breed. When it gets strong, it'll bite." I nodded quietly, not to argue, but because I understood. He wasn't cruel, he was afraid. Afraid of what he couldn't control, of the wildness still flickering beneath that frail little body. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I wrapped Rook in a fur towel, opened the back door, and stepped into the cold. The wind bit my face. The snow crunched sharply beneath my boots. The moonlight spread silver across the field as I made my way toward the old stable at the edge of the farm, the one that used to hold my grandfather's horses. The wooden door creaked as I pushed it open. The smell of hay and old dust drifted out, strangely comforting. I laid a thick blanket in the corner, placed Rook on it, then tucked a hot water bottle wrapped in cloth beside him. He shifted slightly, burrowing deeper into the fabric. His breathing still fragile but steadier. I sat down next to him, my back against the cold wall, listening to the wind seep through the gaps in the boards. "I'm sorry," I whispered, afraid even my voice might break the calm. "I lied to them, but you'll be safer here." Rook didn't respond, just a faint shiver under the blanket. I pulled an old brush from my coat pocket and ran it gently through his tangled fur. Each stroke carried the scent of soil, snow, and survival. Beneath the grime, his coat began to show hints of warm brown, and something inside me softened. I stayed with him until my fingers went numb from the cold. Before leaving, I leaned close and murmured, "If I come back tomorrow, you'll remember these footsteps, won't you?" I hadn't expected that he actually would. The next morning, when I opened the stable door, Rook lifted his head. His soft ears drooped. His wet brown eyes met mine, and that tiny tail thumped weakly against the blanket. I smiled, not a laugh, but that quiet sound that happens when your heart finally unclenches. I fed him warm milk and sat there telling him stories that didn't matter about school, about Mom, about the things I feared but could never say aloud. Rook didn't understand the words, but he listened. Every night after that I snuck back to the stable with a bottle of milk, a small bag of mashed food, and another hot water bottle. He grew faster than I expected. Each time I came, Rook stood a little longer, took a few wobbly steps, fell, and stood again. One night, he touched my hand with his nose, no fear, no teeth. In that moment, I knew trust had begun to take root. "Good boy," I whispered, stroking the space between his ears. "You know I'm scared too, but you're teaching me how to be brave again." And as I said it, I realized I was confessing something I'd hidden for a long time, that there were frozen corners inside me, just like the emptiness I'd seen in his eyes the first day. But now, a little warmth had found its way in. I left the stable just before dawn. The snow had stopped. The gray sky was blushing faint pink. I turned back and saw through the crack in the door Rook curled up under his blanket, head resting on the water bottle, ears twitching softly as if he could hear me leaving. I closed the door gently, my chest lighter, but aware of one truth. This was the first secret I'd ever kept from my family. A small secret, warm, and dangerously alive. It was Thursday night, cloudy, bitter, and cold. The wind came roaring down from the north. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, grabbed a bottle of warm milk and a hot water pack. When I opened the back door, I didn't turn on the lights, only the faint glow from the kitchen spilled into the dark. My footsteps made no sound on the frozen ground. The old stable emerged through the mist. The wooden door creaked softly as I pushed it open. Rook was lying under the blanket head, lifting slightly, his soft ears drooping to the sides. When he saw me, his tail gave a tiny wag. I smiled, set my things down, and whispered, "Hey there, little warrior." He whined, softly stretched his leg, and nudged my hand with his nose. I sat down, opened the milk bottle, and as he began to lap at each drop, I felt a peace I couldn't find anywhere else. A quiet, private peace that existed only here. I didn't know someone else was watching. My father had already suspected something. I'd been eating less at dinner, staying out longer each night. The back door was always left ajar, and in the pale glow of the porch light, he'd noticed the prints in the snow, tiny paw marks, not human ones. That night, he followed me. I didn't hear anything but the wind and Rook's soft, steady breathing. Then a faint sound broke through the back hinge shifting. I turned. Dad stood there, framed by the moonlight snow, clinging to his coat, his expression cold as the air between us. "Emma," he said quietly. I got to my feet, my heartbeat pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. His gaze swept past me and landed on Rook. He didn't need an explanation. He understood everything. The blanket on the floor, the bottle, the paw prints, the chew marks along the edge of the fabric, proof of everything I'd been hiding. For a moment, he just breathed deeply. Then his voice came low and firm. "You lied to us." I bit my lip, clutching the bottle tight. "I just wanted to help him live," I said. "You don't understand." "Understand." He cut in his tone, calm but rumbling beneath like thunder building in the distance. "You think I don't? He's a Doberman. Emma, not a cat, not a rabbit. He was bred to attack. When he grows up, he won't even recognize you." I shook my head, tears spilling before I even noticed. "No, you're wrong." He knows me. He remembers me. He's just a baby. Dad, a baby someone left out in the snow. He stepped closer, his boots pressing into the hay. You have no idea what you're risking. If he bites you, if he's diseased, I'm not afraid. I interrupted, my voice cracking. I'm not afraid anymore. He needs me. Then, for the first time, Rook barked. A small, hoarse sound, but it filled the stable like thunder. Dad froze. We both looked down at him. He wasn't growling or baring his teeth, just standing there between us, trembling, but unyielding, his eyes locked on my father's. I rested my hand on his head, whispering, "It's okay, Rook, it's okay." In that instant, I saw something strange in my father's eyes, not anger, but fear. Not fear of the dog, fear of me. Fear that I was losing myself for something he couldn't understand. He turned away and stepped toward the door. "Tomorrow, I'm calling the rescue center," he said quietly. "This ends here." The wooden door shut behind him, and a draft of cold air swept through the stable. I dropped to my knees and held Rook close. He buried his head against my hand, whimpering softly, as if he already knew what was coming. I pressed my face into his fur, whispering through broken breaths, "If they take you, I'm going with you." Outside, the wind screamed through the trees. The snow fell heavier, thicker. And I knew, from that moment on, the fragile peace between us was over. And the real cold had only just begun. The next morning, the sky was so white I couldn't tell where the ground ended and the clouds began. No sound, no wind, just that heavy kind of silence, the kind that feels like the whole world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I stood on the porch, bundled in my coat, watching my father prepare the truck. The wooden crate sat in the back, tied down with ropes. Inside, Rook was curled under his fur blanket. Through a small crack, I could see his brown eyes wide, still not understanding what was coming. "Dad," I called, my voice raw. "I'm doing this for him," he said, without looking at me. "We can't keep him here, Emma. He needs a place with trainers, with doctors, with people who know what they're doing." Each word fell like stone. I couldn't speak. My lips trembled, but my throat locked tight. I just stood there, gripping the edge of my coat, watching him start the engine. The motor roared dry sharp. White smoke curled into the air. As the truck began to move, I stepped forward. "Dad, please don't go too far. Let me go back inside." He cut me off, his voice flat but firm. "Stay there." I watched the truck disappear into the thickening snow. The road turned white. The world vanished. Inside the cab, my father drove slowly. The snow came harder now, whipping against the windshield. I knew that road, how it curved through the woods where the wind hit the hardest. The storm came faster than the forecast said. The wind howled. The truck shook. Then a sharp crack. The tires slipped. The truck skidded sideways. Brakes screamed. A hard jolt. The crate flew open. He told me later, his voice breaking, that in that moment of panic he saw Rook tumble out, hit the snow, and vanish into the white. He jumped out, shouting the dog's name, but the wind swallowed every sound. All that remained was the empty crate, its lid flapping, and an endless sea of snow. That afternoon, he came home alone. I knew instantly. I could see it in his eyes, no anger, no victory, just the hollow look of someone who'd lost what he meant to protect. I didn't ask. I just turned and ran into the wind. "Emma," he called behind me, but I didn't stop. Snow clawed at my face, slicing like tiny blades, but I kept moving. "Rook," I shouted into the storm. "Rook, can you hear me?" No answer, only wind, only my footsteps fade into the thick snow. I crossed the fence line, the frozen creek, and reached the edge of the woods. No tracks, no bark, nothing but white. I kept walking, numb hands, numb feet, driven by one thought. He's out there, cold, scared, waiting for me. By the time the sun sank behind the storm clouds, I collapsed. My hands buried in snow, my breath ragged. "Rook," I whispered, but the wind stretched my voice thin and carried it away. A hand touched my shoulder. It was Jacob, my old friend from the farm across the river. "Emma, you have to come back," he said, his voice shaking in the storm. "No." I shook my head. "If I leave him, he'll die. You'll die too." I looked into his eyes and saw only fear, the same fear I'd seen in my father's the night before. We searched for 2 days. I called until my voice was gone, until the storm itself drowned every sound. Everywhere I looked, I thought I saw him, a shadow in the snow, a flash of black, but when I ran to it, it was only wind lifting shards of ice. By the 3rd morning, the sky had cleared. The ground lay still. Snow buried the fences, the road, the world. I knelt in the field, my palms sinking into the frozen crust. "Rook," I whispered one last time, my breath breaking. "I'm sorry. You trusted me, and I let you disappear." No bark, no echo, just the faint hum of wind gliding over the emptiness. It was a kind of pain that made no sound, only weight. I looked toward the distant forest where the storm had passed. The sun was rising now. Light shimmered across the snow, bright enough to sting my eyes. But in that light, the world looked unbearably empty. I had saved a life from the cold, only to lose it back to winter itself. I stood, each step heavier than the last, and made my way home. There were no tears left, only that hollow, bone-deep cold, the kind that doesn't come from snow, but from somewhere deep inside the heart. 3 days after the storm, the world was too quiet. No wind, no falling snow, just that heavy silence, the kind that lets you hear your own heartbeat. I stepped outside as the sun began to rise. Light glared off the snowdrifts, blanketing the yard so white it hurt my eyes. Each step made a sharp, brittle sound like glass cracking. I didn't know where I was going. I just wanted to see the place where I'd called his name until my voice broke. When I reached the wooden fence, the same spot where we'd found that first crate, I stopped. The ground was still. No footprints, no shadow, only snow, endless and cold. I closed my eyes. I thought of Rook's brown eyes, the faint pulse under my palm, the small bark echoing through the old stable, and the look he gave me the night before he vanished, the one I could never forget. "Rook," I whispered, my voice breaking. A faint breeze brushed past my ear, carrying the scent of wet soil and thawing ice. I turned to leave, but something shifted at the edge of my vision. A small, dark shape, trembling, half buried in the snow. I froze. I didn't dare believe it. It didn't move. Or maybe I was too afraid that I was imagining it. Then the little shape stirred slowly, pushing itself upright. Thin legs shaking, a narrow back, black and tan fur coated with frost. And then those brown eyes, deep, tired, and unmistakable, looked straight at me. "Rook." The word caught in my throat. I ran. I don't remember falling or getting up again. Snow exploded beneath my feet, my breath breaking, my heart hammering so loud it drowned everything else. When I reached him, Rook stood unsteadily a few steps away, his small body swaying. He lifted his head, and in his mouth was a strip of red wool. My glove, the one I'd dropped the first day I held him. I broke down, crying not from grief, but from the miracle I didn't think I deserved. I opened my arms, and Rook took one small step, then another, until he collapsed into me. His body was ice cold, but his breath, it was there, faint but real. I held him close, whispering through my tears, "Oh God, you came back. You really came back." Rook didn't bark. He just pressed his head against my chest, his shallow breaths warming my skin an answer without words. I lowered my forehead to his, and my tears fell onto his frozen fur. And in that moment, I understood. He hadn't come back to live. He'd come back to show me that love never loses its way. I carried him home, my breath sinking with his. The door burst open. My mother turned, startled. "Emma," she gasped. "It's him," I said. "He's alive. He came home." My father stepped out of his room, eyes wide in disbelief. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he walked forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You saved him," he said, his voice rough as wind. I shook my head, tears spilling freely. "No, he saved me." We laid Rook by the fireplace, drying his fur, cleaning his wounded paws, and wrapping him in the old blanket. When I set the bowl of milk before him, he sniffed it, then began to lick slowly, tremblingly, as if afraid it was only a dream. Dad sat behind me, silent for a long time. Finally, he said softly, "Emma, you know what you have to do, don't you?" I understood. I didn't speak. I just nodded. That evening, as the sky faded pale, we wrapped Rook in his blanket and placed him gently inside the same wooden crate, but this time it was lined with warmth and softness. I stroked his fur one last time and whispered, "You're going to be cared for, loved, and free. That's what you deserve." Rook blinked his ears, twitching faintly as if he understood. I leaned my forehead to his and murmured, "Thank you for coming back to teach me that love isn't about holding on. It's about having the courage to let go." The truck rolled down the icy road. I sat in the back, staring out the window where sunset painted the snowfields red. I didn't feel cold, because somewhere out there in the woods, in the soft, golden light I knew, Rook would learn to run again. Spring came early that year. The snow melted fast, revealing damp soil and the first tender shoots of grass. I sat on the porch steps, a cup of coffee in my hands, watching the sun climb slowly above the roof of the old stable. The house was quiet. The wind was warm, and I knew somewhere out there Rook was alive. Since the day we brought him to the rescue center, he's appeared in my dreams, his brown eyes, the twitch of his small tail, the faint breath against my wrist. In those dreams, he's not weak anymore. Not trembling, he runs. Across open fields, drenched in sunlight, his black and tan coat shines like silk. He doesn't look back, and somehow that makes me smile. My father often asks, in that soft, cautious tone of his, "Do you still miss him?" I just nod, I do. Then he falls silent, his eyes drifting toward the horizon, where the fields meet the sky. I think he misses Rook too, he just doesn't say it aloud. A week ago, a letter arrived from the rescue center. Rook was recovering well, growing fast. Strong alert, cautious, but not aggressive. They wrote that one day when he's ready, he'll be moved to a larger sanctuary, a place where dogs like him are trained for search and rescue, or to protect other animals. I folded the letter and tucked it inside my journal. I didn't cry. I just felt warmth spread quietly through my chest, like a hand resting there for a moment. That evening, as dusk settled, I stepped out onto the porch. The wind drifted across the roof, carrying the scent of wet grass and new life. Beneath the fence where the wooden crate once lay, I placed a new red wool glove. Not for Rook to find, but to remind myself that he once did. I looked toward the distant line of trees where last winter we had searched for him in despair. Now there was only silence, but the kind that feels peaceful, not lonely. I closed my eyes, listening to the first insects of spring. For a brief moment I thought I heard footsteps, soft and quick, running through wet grass, then a breath, then a small hoarse bark I knew by heart. I opened my eyes. No one was there. Only the sky thick with stars and a pale line of moonlight drawn across the ground. But I knew Rook's spirit was still here, like a thin silver thread stretching between two worlds, the human and the wordless. I used to think language made us superior. Now I know you don't need words to understand a life reaching out to you. You don't need speech to feel love. just a look of breath and a heart that's open. Rook taught me that. He never spoke, but he knew when I was sad. He never smiled, but his eyes made me believe everything would be all right. And when he left, he taught me one last truth: that real love doesn't confine. It frees. Mom stepped out onto the porch, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You look at peace," she said softly. I smiled. I think I finally learned how to love without being afraid to lose. She nodded, and together we gazed out at the fields where the snow had vanished. On the damp earth, the young grass swayed gently in the wind. I drew a deep breath. The air was warm, soft, scented with life. And in the wind, I thought I heard a faint voice, quiet, almost like a whisper carried from far away. "I'm still here. I'm running. I'm free now." I smiled, tears falling without pain. I tell this story not for pity, but so people might believe that sometimes the smallest creatures awaken the deepest parts of us: compassion, courage, and the capacity to love without condition. If one day you see a fragile animal on the roadside, don't look away, because maybe it's the one that will teach you how to be the person you once forgot to be. This spring, when the southern winds returned, I saw a small, dark shape at the edge of the woods running through the light. I can't say for sure if it was Rook. Maybe it was only my imagination, but that doesn't matter. I smiled and whispered, "Run, Rook. Run strong. I'll always remember." The wind brushed my cheek, warm and tender like a soft lick from long ago. And I knew somewhere out there a little Doberman, once left to die in the snow, had found his way home not just to the world, but to my heart.